Okay, so I'm now going to talk to you about the government initiative that has said that the government is seeking for all electric new car sales by 2040. But that leaves us with the challenge of, 2040 is some way away. It's 22 years away, so what's going to happen now? I would assert that at the moment, actually, we have a better understanding of our transport data, and I don't think that understanding is very good, than we do of our air quality data. But there's a strong regional agenda. This is a really important city in the UK, Birmingham, where we are now. The whole of the region is important, and it's got massive challenges ahead. It's already been highlighted as one of the 5 cities that needs to implement a clean air zone, and it is getting on with that. Actually, I think every city in the UK needs a clean air zone, and it's slightly obtuse and obscure as to why 5 cities have been singled out because of excess NOx levels. If you go to any road in any part of this country that is busy, that has traffic queuing, you're going to get high NOx levels, and they are very dangerous. And they're not the only thing that's dangerous either. There is chronic congestion. There are huge challenges ahead in the region. Just about everything passes through the region, and yet we're going to improve things with bypasses and new road developments. HS2 is the biggest bypass in the world that's going to be built soon, and that is going to place massive pressure on an already congested local region. And the Mayor's transport strategy, in common with many other transport strategies across the country, by all the mayors, is focused on creating a better sense of place and actually getting traffic out of our city centres, and doing that through modal shift and flattening peaks. If you look at the challenge where transport is concerned, we account for approximately 40% of UK energy consumption. It's massive. And 24% of UK domestic greenhouse gas emissions come from transport, to say nothing of the effect on air quality, particularly more locally. It's a significant contributor to air quality reduction, and particulate matter that we've heard a lot about, so-called PM, that comes in two main categories, PM3 and PM10, particularly serious. And trust me, that ain't going to go away with electric vehicles. Electric vehicles will still generate particulate matter through brake dust, through churning up the road surface and shedding tyre dust. Ain't going to go away. But do we have enough data? This I took yesterday from DEFRA's own site, where they sample particular areas. You can see that actually the amount of sampling going on is tiny, and air quality sensors are particularly vulnerable to deterioration. They don't report a consistent picture. They need constant maintenance, and they only give you a very, very local representation that can be affected by microclimate as to what the air quality actually is. However, I wouldn't suggest that means that the picture is rosy. I suspect the picture is much worse than the level of sensors that has been implemented. Now, DEFRA sensors are not even the total picture. Birmingham has a lot more than DEFRA is actually taking feeds and results from. So, in this period, over the next 22 years, where we move to the start of an all-electric future, because if new car sales are going to be electric by 2040, that doesn't mean that every car on the road or every vehicle is going to be electric by then. But the question is, are they the answer? And if so, how can we bring about this shift? Well, let's look at some of the challenges. Let's start with where we are now. We've got minimal penetration. 0.4% of UK vehicles are currently electric. And we've only got 14,250 charge points at the moment. The funding of thousands of charge points that is available from central government is actually not being taken up by local government. In a climate in which we hear that local government is very short of cash. But the trouble, of course, is not just that it's short of cash, it's actually short of resources as a result of being short of cash. So it hasn't actually got the time to exploit necessarily everything that's on offer. There just are not the people there, you know. So starved is local government of resources and cash. Now, projections suggest that about 25 to 35% of new vehicle sales will be electric by 2040. That means that we've still got a lot of wasting out of the estate to go, and the waste out rate is an average of 11 years. So it's not as if we're going to have an all-electric estate by 2040. We've got other challenges. Our homes typically consume about 12 to 15 kilowatt hours in 24 hours. So I think if you burn a 100 watt bulb, and those are getting rarer these days, for 10 hours, you've used up a kilowatt hour. So that gives you an idea of scale and proportion. We have certain peaks during the day, and those peaks are critical to infrastructure, power infrastructure, that will be put under enormous load. But in order to travel 100 miles, at the moment, with battery technology and electric car efficiency technology as good as it is at the moment, to travel 100 miles takes 30 kilowatt hours. But it's cheap because, you know, given the cost of a litre of petrol, compare that to the cost of charging an electric vehicle. If you can get a kilowatt hour for 14 pence, it's still a lot cheaper than petrol, even if you pay the full tariff. And of course, many people will work their way around doing that. So it's quite attractive, but it will put our power infrastructure, particularly at peak, under a lot of pressure. So what are we doing about that? Well, the government has got the mandate. There's a workplace charging scheme. There's an electric vehicle home charge scheme. And we think that what's going to happen, fairly obviously actually, is that electric car adoption is going to grow out from affluent areas. And a lot of thought is being put into this to try and get ahead of adoption. So if the affluent area is the first places to get electric vehicles, then they're going to need enough charge points. Otherwise, they'll get dispirited, and the whole thing will start to unravel. But ultimately, we've got to have the right power in the right places. And in order to do that, we're going to need a smart grid. That is actually one of the main reasons why we're all being encouraged to get smart metering. Because that way we can put power back into the grid, as well as consuming power from the grid. And electric vehicles could be a massive battery to cope with peak demand, which sometimes can be quite transient. And that will also enable small-scale local generation, particularly from renewables. There's a big prize, air quality improvement, not least. It'll reduce emissions generally, we'll get a better energy balance, and it will improve the nation's health. So those are big prizes. They are certainly massively worth having. On the other hand, I would ask, is the juice worth the squeeze? I would say, yeah, assuredly yes, but there is massive change required, and we cannot underestimate that. Behavioural change is required. If we all plugged in and recharged our electric vehicles at exactly the same time of day, no traditional power infrastructure could cope with that. So behavioural change is required to nudge people into travelling at different times of day, avoid the peak. That has a congestion reduction benefit as well, charging at different times of day, and. There's also going to be a massive industrial shift, because we'll be moving away from petrochemicals, and we can expect massive resistance from those in the petrochemicals industry that want to continue to sell us petrochemicals. Massive changes required in terms of tooling up batteries, improving battery technology. And of course, the advent of renewable energy. and as little NIMBYism as possible about the need for that, please, particularly from the RAF and the MOD in the North Sea. At the moment are often a barrier to planning of the offshore wind that for the rest of us, concerned as we are about our natural landscapes, is rather preferable. And we're going to need massive infrastructure change. The scale and the cost of that is absolutely incredible. It dwarfs the kind of the broadband rollout and things like that. There are significant risks to going this route. Is an electric vehicle the answer? A vehicle that is ultimately, using electricity to drive along the road may well be, but are we backing the wrong horse? Could it actually be that the much more nascent technology of hydrogen and fuel cell could actually be a much better option? And by the time we discover that, we've already rolled out a lot of infrastructure to cope with charging electric vehicles. Accommodating the uptake without smart technology and network management would be a disaster. I refer you to a report by the Green Alliance, which is a really, really good independent charitable trust and think tank, which has looked into this in some depth. And they have really seen how challenging it is, and they look around the world at people who've got this right and got this wrong. And if you try and do electric vehicles with traditional electricity generating infrastructure, you're going to be dead. It's just not worth thinking about. We've got to have smart infrastructure with smart meters and so forth to do it. Because at the moment, without it, we get demand spikes in individual neighbourhoods. And as as people go over to rapid charging, very, very ultra-fast charging, so it gets worse. Just think of broadband. It's going to be the same all over again. But whereas broadband, there's a few fibre optic cables, pretty simple things to drag through the ground. Sorry to those in that industry. I know it's really hard and difficult. I've been in telecoms. But actually, to try and get power infrastructure, massive cabling, that is a huge, big, heavy-duty thing. And plus, you can get nasty electric shocks off it, which you can't fibre optic cable. So we've got some challenges ahead. Now, I put questions there. Well, I'm going to censor myself from the question bit, but I'm very happy to take questions in the panel.